Yes, good morning. 19th Elul. One day after Chai Elul. It says about Chai Elul. It gives a chayus in Elul. So it gives a power to Elul. So hopefully we'll feel some of that for the next few days on our way to Rosh Hashanah. So in Hayom Yom, 19th Elul. So this week's Parsha is Parshas Netzavim, right? Atem Netzavim Hayayim. You stand today, all of you, from the heads of your tribes down to the wood choppers. And just a side note, many of you may know that the Rebbe often told us the way to understand it, Atem Netzavim Hayayim, and then it gives levels. No matter what level you're on, remember, Hayayim is Rosh Hashanah. And on Rosh Hashanah, all of us are standing together. All the Jewish souls that was, were, and ever will be are all standing together, coronating the king. So, Atem Netzavim. We got now, when the Alter Rebbe was still in Vitebsk, he once expounded on the verse, Atem Netzavim, you stand, and going down to the wood choppers. Speaking of wood, yesterday, remember the wood? The wood you burn and all that's left over is the offer. So the wood choppers, chopping wood, is an idiom for counsel, advice, chopping. What does he mean? He interpreted choppers of wood to mean that one must, quote, chop out the many thoughts or counsel in the hearts of man. That's a pasuk in Mishlei. Many are the thoughts in the hearts of man. You have to chop out and select. Be careful. Those who draw water, that's another level, the water drawers, these are the lower levels in the strata of society. The worker bees who chop wood, and in those days they distributed the wood. This was a business, right? Chopping wood and distributing it, and also drawing water for other people. So he interpreted water drawers. One must drain out the water that makes all enjoyments grow. This is also a pasuk. Water is compared to tainug, just like when you're thirsty. Water. So water is a tainug, delight. You have to be selective in what you're taking your delights from, and similarly, you have to be selective in the thoughts that you allow to enter your brain and exit your brain. So a little drosh in Atem Netzavim Hayayim. Okay, any questions on that one? Lessons in Tanya. We're continuing with what I have said a couple of times is an extremely fundamental part of Hasidus in general, which is understanding the 10 sephiros, the 10 powers which God uses to create, and the 10 powers with which our soul is invested, on the theme of we're created in God's image. The pasuk says, just like Chazal said, just like Hashem embeds himself in the world, so the soul embeds itself in the body. So we have 10 powers, Chabad down to Malchus, and these reflect the 10 spheros. And we're beginning now to take each one of the midos and understand a bit about what they are and where their source is. So in Lessons in Tanya, this is on the top of page 260. And in Lakuti Amorim, it's in the center of page Kuf Beis, opposite 242. Just a second. Okay, it's a long piece, but I think it's fairly straightforward. Interrupt me, please, if you don't understand. I'm not sure how much time we'll have at the end for questions. Okay. The whole generality of the 10 sephiros, the spheros as they are invested in a person. And remember, very important point from yesterday, in that metaphor of the log. hope everyone here was there yesterday. When you burn away everything, you're left with the offer. And the offer is the essence of the wood. Without the corporeality, the physicality, there's no log, even though the log is nicely sort of puffed up with water and then with the smoke, with fire, Eish, Mayim, etc., and Ruach and air. The essence is the offer. And that was what we were getting at yesterday. When Avram said, I'm dust and offer, he said, the midah of chesed that's in me is not like the midah of chesed up above in all of its fullness. In me, the midah, and in all of us, the midah and all of the midas, and that's why I'm saying this, because it relates to all the midos. All the midos are like a distillation down to the root, the mahus, the essence. And as I said yesterday, on the quote from Sefer Yetzirah, the end, which is the essence, is wedged in the beginning. So each of our souls contains the essence of each of these midos, which we're about to describe. So the generality of the 10 spheres as they are embedded in the soul of a person, it's known to everything. I'm going to skip these parentheses and brackets that are in the printed version of the Tanya. It's known to everybody that the set midos in general are divided into 7. And he's going to go now into each and every one of them. And all of the details and the specific midos that are in a person, they come from those supernal midos of Hashem, which we mentioned yesterday. Which the 10 spheros, the 10 of God's midos, are the source of all and the generality of all the midos. Shehein midos of Chesed. Now he starts. And what are the midos? We'll start with the top midah. Midos of Chesed. What is Chesed? Chesed is the energy that we have, lahashpia bli gvul, in order to give forth without limitation. Remember this when we're speaking about acts of kindness and tzedakah, that every one of us have within us the ability to overcome whatever we're going to talk about now, our gavura, and give bli gvul, without limitation, because the midah of God's chesed is bli gvul. And then midas of gavura, what's gavura? Letzamtzem lahashpia, to contract from flowing and giving out, kol kach, so much. Or shalei hashpia, or klal, or maybe not to even give out at all, holding back in situations where you need to hold back. And then midas rachamim. Rachamim is mercy. L'rachim al mi sheshayach loshen rachman is to have mercy on one to whom it's relevant to have mercy, Allah, on that person. V'hi midas hamamutzis ben gevura lechesed, and it's an intermediary. It's actually a composite of both chesed and gevura. One chesed, shehil ashpia, which chesed is lashpia. Chesed would give forth and give l'chol gam to anybody, gam l'mi shalei shayach loshen rachmanis, even one who doesn't need any compassion. Chesed is just unadulterated flow. Klal, he'll give, chesed will give to somebody who doesn't need anything at all, because chesed is gratuitous. Its nature is to flow. There needs to be a constraint, and that constraint and balance is someone's in need. Is what do we need? What do we need to give that person to deal with the need that the person has? And going on with this, the chesed will give to anybody who's not literally dwelling, who's not dwelling with any pain at all. But back to Rachmanis. Rachmanis is a midah mamutzos. It's a intermediary, a conglomerate, a mamutzos, nikras tiferes, and therefore Rachmanis is also named Tiferes. Why? Because Tiferes, maybe big de Tiferes, like when you have a beautiful garment, al derech mashal, by way of example, shehu beged sevu begavnin habe. Beauty is made by composition of more than one. A single note, a monotone, for instance, he's using colors, I'll just for a moment use music. A monotone is not nearly as interesting as a chord. So harmonizing things together, even things which may be opposite, to give a little nuance to that chord. Or colors, mixing colors together are much more interesting than the color white per se or all blue. The subtleties are what makes the thing interesting, and the subtleties are the blends. And that's why Rahmanis is called Tiferes, beauty, because the most beautiful are the appropriate blends and tinges. For instance, in a beged savua, in a dyed beged, begavin in harbor with many colors, which are mixed together just right. Bederek shehu tiferes, in a manner that creates beauty. So that's the skinny, so to speak, on Chesed, Gevurah, and Tiferes so far. Masha'en came, he's going to continue a bit with Tiferes. But beged hatzibura begavin echad, if the cloth is dyed with just one color, lo shayich by loshen Tiferes. We don't call that Tiferes, because Tiferes is a balance and a mixture and of nuances of many or at least two colors. And that's what mercy is, right? It's a balance of Chesed and Gevurah. Now these are the three, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes. It's called Chagas. It's a group. You've heard of Chagas Hasidim, right? Hasidim whose main avoda and approach is through midos, Chagas. So that's a group. And the next group down begins the taking of those midos and bringing them down to actual deed, which is the bottom of the stack. So, and bringing them to Maisa also involves a triad. The next triad, which is Nehi, Netzach, Hoid, and Yesod. So the Shas Hashpor, when you actually want to now bring the flow down, you've designed it in such a way that it's correct, and you want to bring it down. Sorokles Yoyetz, one needs to take counsel and advice, Echla Hashpia, how to actually actualize this flow, in a manner that the receiver will receive it. It has to be appropriate to the receiver. Kigayin, for instance, a person, you want to give over a concept, you want to give over a new idea to somebody. A father or a parent who wants to teach his son something new. If the parent or the father, we're going to use the father continually here, father and son, of a parent-child. If the father gives it over the way it is in the father's mind, the son won't be able to receive it. He has to, the father has to order it in just the right way that's appropriate for the receiver. So it goes through some change in the father. He has to speak it just the correct way and give it over little by little. So this idea of counseling, taking counsel with yourself, you've got Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, you have something you want to act, now taking counsel with yourself and how to actualize it. This advising yourself, so to speak, Nikras Netzach L'choid. These are the two balancers of Netzach on the right and Hod on the left, just like we had Chesed and Gevurah. This is balancing Netzach and Hod. Shehen Kolius Yatzoyis, which are called, by Chazal, the advising kidneys. Like the kidneys, I don't know, you could say that they make decisions because they're not intellectual organs, but they do make decisions because they're the ones who filter things, just that the things should be balanced just right, the kidneys. And likewise, trained boyan, likewise the two testicles, amavashlim hazera, which cook the seed, shehi hatipa, which is the drop, the seminal drop, hanimsheches mehamoyach, which comes from the brain, the hainu davar chochma, the seminal drop, the drop of semen begins in the brain, where chochma lodges, in chochma v'seichel, hanimshach meseichel ha'av, and it comes down, this seminal drop, from the seichel of the father, from the intellect of the father, and it won't be effective if it's just this very refined drop, the way it is in the father's brain, the sichle and intellect. So the seminal drop has to go through some transition from its very refined, like the nakuda, like the yud of the Shem Havaya, right? For it to create, needs to expand into the hay of the Shem Havaya. So that seminal drop is like the yud. It has to change its state a bit from its very refinedness, the way it is in the seichel of the father. And it has to bring about a lower level. It has to come into a lower level, which isn't so refined, kolkav. Now he's back to the mushal. The mushal is the seminal drop, meaning the kernel of intellectual or conceptual or concept that the father wants to give to the son can't be given in the same refined way that it exists in the father. In order for the son to receive it, in the son's brain and understanding, it has to go through some changes. It has to be delivered the way the receiver can take it. And this is exactly, metaphorically, the same way the seminal drop, which descends from the brain, which is very refined in that state, and that's his gasen, it becomes thicker, v'chumrius, and more coarse and physicalized, mamish, v'kloyes turein bo'in, as it comes down and gets passing through the kidneys and the testicles. The gam, so that's netzach and hoid. The gam netzach and hoid nikra shchokim, and also the netzach and hoid are called shchokim, are called the grinders, like a grinding mill, the rechayim and millstones. Right? You take something, a kernel, and what do? You crush it and give breath to it, and you kind of open it up so it becomes useful. So you grind the seed. And so netzach and hod, in the language of Kabbalah, in the Kabbalistic way of understanding it, netzach and hod are the millstones that grind the grain, meaning the nourishment in the worlds up above and in Olam Haba for tzaddikim. Just like one grinds wheat in millstones. And what happens when you grind wheat in a millstone, as I mentioned? The wheat crumbles into pieces, dakim, into very fine, small pieces. So similarly, the father has to minimize the seichel, open it up and minimize it for the child to receive it. And this intellectual thing that he's trying to deliver, which he wants to deliver, which he wants to flow to his son, libanai to his son. And he has to take the concept as it exists by him and divide it in bite-sized pieces, in parts, many pieces, and give it to him, and little by little, he has to give these over so that it becomes internalized in his das. Sort of like feeding a child, right? Little by little. You have a lot of porridge in the bowl. You've got to take it apart and give it little by little. So this is the function of netzach and hoid, the advising kidneys. And furthermore about netzach, it has another quality. Netzach is word is lashon natseach, lam natseach, right? And every tillim, lam natseach. Lam natseach there means to orchestrate. It means to conduct. It means to arrange, and it also means netzach is victory. So also, b'chinas netzachu lenatseach ula'amid neged kol manea. Persistence. You want the child to understand. You want teacher-student relationship, right? Your job as a teacher is to help them understand something deep. So you are persistent in trying to find the right way to say it so that you get a aha from the students. So that's netzach, persistence. To stand up against anything which is interfering the flow, particularly frustration. We might say, I just can't find the right words. But you persevere because your role is to convey knowledge. So you persevere. And to hold back and to refrain from anything which is going to hold back the flow, the halimid b'benai, and the teaching to the son, Mibayas umachutz, whether it's something internal to you that's holding you back, or some circumstance outside of you, that's mibayas umachutz. In the house or outside, you overcome that. That's netzach. He explained, mibayas, something internal to you, and l'chazik neged midas hagavura. You may have an attribute of gavura, right? That you know the child is hungry for porridge, is hungry for knowledge, but you're more of a gavura-dika person, the hatsimsum, and you're more to yourself. Sheba'av atzmai, that's maybe the nature of this particular father. Shehima eres dinim ruratzoine. In fact, the father may not only be someone who's by nature is holding back, but he arouses dinim in his own will, al banei, over his son, lamer, to say, my son's not ready for this, right? I'm going to hold back because I'm not ready for this. But if the son is like a little bird, mouth open, obviously it's a fit time, because there's no better time to teach than when someone is open to learn. So that's netzach. Okay, so we did netzach and hoed, the balancing, the advising, finding just the right way. Then we have Yesod, right? Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Hoed, Yesod. Yesod hu al derech mashal hiskashrus. Yesod is joining together. Yesod. It's foundation, joining everything, giving it a strong foundation. So it's hiskashrus, bringing everything together. Shemekasha ha'av sikle besikle benai. This is when you're at the point, the delivery point. You've decided, we're using this mashal. I'm hoping you understand this is a mashal, the way you balance a teacher and a father and child, a teacher and a student, any situation where someone is waiting for your presentation, right? I mean, professional presenters, this is the key to the value of the presentation, that it resonates with the audience, right? So when the delivery is everything. Yesod is the delivery vehicle. So in that, and when the person is conjoining now with the son of the student, shemakasha of sikle b'seichel b'noi, father and son, when the son unites his seichel with the seichel of the son, the shashamule, at the time of learning, imoy, with him, the av of son, with love and willfulness and wantingness, sheraitza sheyavin b'nei, because he really wants the son to learn. And without this bond, without this hiskashrus, this tie, gami hoya haben shameh devorim elo. A very interesting point. Without this yesod, without this presentation of, I really want to connect with you. So the son, without that, if they didn't have this, the son elo from the father, and I'm skipping a whole bracket here. The son wouldn't understand so much. So not only does the father have to distill the concept, but he has to join with the son in a meaningful ways that the son feels and is I'm going to use the word embrace, though he doesn't use this here, but there's a connection, a kesher between the two of them. And when there's a kesher, a bond, then the knowledge or the relationship as a whole, of course, is a much more improved and much more holistic relationship. So then if it weren't like that, that the father actually unites his intellect with his mind with the mind of the son, mind to mind, and speaks with him face to face, with love and with desire, that the child feels how much the father wants to convey this and to teach him. And the greater is the desire of the father, and the tainig, and the great delight that the father has with this. So the more that is, the greater is the hashpah, the halimid gadol, the flow and the learning is much greater. Because the son is able to now actually, his channels are open from the hiskashrus. This is yesod, hiskashrus. From the channels which are open from the father, mashpir yaser, and the father is incented to actually give over more from the loving, willful unification, embrace, although it may not be a physical embrace, of the Father and the Son, that they feel close to each other. Through, through the desire and the delight, in fact, from the delight of the two in their relationship, the father now is actually drawn into becoming more connected. And he said, the father's intellect gets enlarged. And I mean, we see this in a teacher-student relationship. The more the child wants to learn, the more the teacher finds things to embody that concept in ways that he may not have found before until this is the whole arousal from below affects an arousal from above. So the intellect of the father gets broader and he finds more ways of delivering that seichel. Misgadol sichloi, the father's seichel becomes bigger. V'rachavas hadas, with much more breadth of knowledge, lahashpir v'lam de to flow and to teach to his child. And he says also this is true, of course, in the physical union, intimacy. There is more abundance of the seminal emission from more desire, vertainen. And that draws more from the brain. And therefore, this relationship in teaching, father and son, or any relationship between two, the more the quality of the relationship, the more endearment, the more flow. Midos Elul, these midos, I know I'm going, and I want you to, if anything's coming up, please, we're not going to have a lot of time. We just have a few more lines, but I told you it's a long piece. But I hope this is coming clear. I mean, he's giving us quite a great amount of clarity in how these midos, what they are and how they operate. Midos Elul, these midos, midos are externality of the soul. And within the midos, there are midos penimius. And what are midos penimius? He gives two examples. Ava v'yira. So we talked about chesed. Chesed is the product of love. When you love somebody, you act kind with them. Gevura is the product of fear. When you're afraid for some reason, you hold back. So these midos that we've been talking about, chesed are the externality, chesed, gevura, teferes, and the internality, what drives them, what drives chesed is love, and what drives gevura is fear or holding back. For instance, in a father, why is the father doing chesed with the child? Because the father loves him. The love is the internal aspect of the external aspect, which is chesed. It's driven by love. And if he holds back his flow, and maybe because of his concern, his fear, his concern, that maybe that he doesn't want to say things what the kid would misunderstand and misconstrue. So he holds back. So the holding back is the root of that, of the Gevura, is Yira. Now, what's the source of the midos? The source of the midos, is both the inner aspect of the midos and the external aspect of the midos, is Chabad. So we just analyzed Chagas, Chesed, Gevura, Teferes, and the He, Netzer Chod Yesod. We haven't touched Malchus, and we won't today. But what's driving that structure of Chagas and the He? That's Chabad. Chabad, Chachma Bina Das. That's the Chabad Shebenafshe. Yisechol Odom, according to the mind of a person, the intellect of the person, Kaktein Midosav, so are the person Midos. Kinira Bechush, as we see in actuality, Sha'akotin, a small kid, Shechabad Shalehem B'Bchinas Katnus, where his intellect is not very well and not mature yet, not well, is in a state of smallness, not mature. So Kach, similarly, Kol Midosav Hoy B'Debon Katne Ha'era. So he wants small things. He wants candy. He doesn't want more sophisticated things because his mind isn't yet developed entirely. The Gam B'Gedolim, and also we see in adults also that Lefi Sichla Yahilo Ish. This is a pasuk in Mishle. According to the quality of mind, that's how a person praises. That's how a man is praised. Ki lefi reiv hakmoseh, the more wisdom, kachu reiv avoseh b'chasdei, more chesed and love and kindness. So the Chabad is what Chachma is on the right side. So Chachma is the mind source of the midah of chesed, which is also on the right. Bina is on the left, which is the mind source for the midah of gevurah. So the more Chachma, the greater, which is on the right, the greater the love and kindness. Similarly, all the other midos, panemius v'chitzonius, whether their internality, in the case of chesed, ava, or their externality, which is the act of chesed, all of them, mekoiden hu mechabad sheboy. The source of them all is from the Chabad of the midos. V'ha'ikir, and the main of the Chabad, of the three, this triad, Chabad, Chokmah Bina Das, is Das. Because Das, Sheboy Nimshach Mibechinas Chokmah Bina, Das, like the Ferris is drawn from Chesed and Gevurah, Das is drawn from Chokmah and Bina. Kinir Bechush, as we see in actuality, Kirafi Shini Hadeus, B'nei Odom, according to the different, here's the word Das, according to the different opinions of people, Zem is one from another, Kachu Shini Midoisen, so are their midos separated. Das is the back of the head, which brings down the spinal cord and connects to the midos. So Das is how we internalize Chabad, Chokmah and Bina. So that's today's time. An exposition of Chabad Chagas Nihit. And remember what we said yesterday, all of this is the essence of this, of all of these midos, because all the other attributes of the midah are the Chesed Elyon, the supernal Chesed, is much more fleshed out. Back to Avram Avinu, we have the essence of all of this, as it like to squeeze out the distillation of it all down here in our 10 spheres and our 10 koichos. All right, we're a little over, but I really do want to, anything that's not understood or any comments you want to make. All right, nobody.
Yeah, but yeah. I'll say something. Yeah. So is this describing when the Alter Rebbe says very often to teach him in his ways?
Yes, you could definitely say that. You have to, in any really makabel, mashpia makabel relationship, whatever it is, it has to be, the mashpia has to have a good intuition and understanding of the derech of the receiver. Now that isn't, by the way, that isn't the way, I'm agreeing with you, that isn't the way Hanuch Lenar al Darke goes. Hanuch Lenar al Darke is much more general, meaning that inside each and every one of us, we have a godly soul, right? And that is our real derech, that is our real nature. So speak to that. But yes, if you're going to speak to that, if you're going to speak to the child's real nature, his godly soul, his godly midos, you have to find the right way of presenting it. Definitely. Good. So we have lots of day today to have relationships with others. As I'll sum this up in an expression Manas Friedman once said, and when I was listening to him years and years ago, and I like it, so I'll share it. When it comes to relationship with anybody, where that you have something to give, say what they need to hear, not what you need to say. And that's a bechein for today. Okay? See you tomorrow.
Thank you.